welcome to this event in the Food Kindness Festival. Thank you everybody so much for coming along. My name's Alison and I'm one of the volunteer team, almost entirely volunteer team who organise the festival. And if you don't know about it, I think there's some brochures still downstairs or a QR code so you can pick up the platform. You can pick up the programme. Okay, so the overarching theme of this year's Kindness Festival is kindness builds bridges. And as part of that, we have the most wonderful exhibition downstairs, actually designed by Teresa sitting there. And Teresa said it would be really nice if people wanted to have a look at that on the way out. And it's interactive. You have the opportunity to add your own thoughts and comments. So please do have a look at that when you do. And then each day within the festival has a specific theme. So on Saturday was kindness to community. Yesterday was kindness to ourselves. And today the theme is kindness and social change. So if you put together kindness builds bridges and kindness and social change, then anybody who knows anything about restorative justice will see how incredibly appropriate it is to be having an afternoon on the subject today. And we feel really, really fortunate to have Nigel with us, who has 60-odd years of experience in the field of working with offenders and... Is that right?
Yeah, it'll do.
Close enough. Not quite.
No, 50.
50. Sorry.
Thank you.
And Amanda used to work with Nigel, and so it was her who suggested that we made this presentation today. So thank you very much, Amanda, and also for helping with all the practical arrangements. And so, as well as being a probation officer, Nigel has worked for NACRO, and he's been involved right from the beginning with setting up restorative justice initiatives, and really at the national platform for restorative justice. So I'm not going to say any more because he will take it into much more shortly. All I can say from my point of view is that restorative justice, I think, is one of the great hopes for how we can bring about change in this country, not just in the justice system, but in our own lives, and how we behave and how we communicate. So I'm really looking forward to this afternoon. And it's planned to be an hour and a half now, seeing we started a tiny bit late. I think we were around a tiny bit late.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's all right.
Thank you.
5 out of 10. Okay, folks. Well, I finally retired at the age of 78, absolutely worn out. And I've taken the last 10 years doing nothing. So I've had to work so hard to get my head round where restorative justice was and where it is now. And in many ways, it's not much further on than when I left it. And I'll explain why in a moment or two. But it's very nice of Amanda and Alison to invite me and cause me more headaches than I've had for the last 5 or 6 years. Now, I don't need to tell you that the criminal justice system is in crisis. Simon Jenkins, and every time I've put my thoughts down on paper, something's happened that I've had to go back and rewrite it. And something happened so late, like Friday, I've had to go back and rethink a bit. To give you an idea of the scale of the crisis, in 1960, the prison population was 30,000. And the government of the day thought it was a crisis. Now, in 2000, there were 6,000 prisoners, 60,000 prisoners. And the present total is 85,000. Predicted to rise, and I'm almost ashamed to say this, it's predicted to rise over the next 3 years to 105,000. In the UK, we have about 150 people in prison per 100,000. The rate in Germany is half that, 70,000 per 100,000. And we have the largest prison population in Western Europe. The total number was boosted in 2020 when the normal sentence remission was reduced from half to a third. It's made a huge difference in the numbers. To that, in what Simon Jenkins, not me, described as a fatuous attempt to be tough on crime. The government took that measure. And to this we have to add 25,000 immigrants and asylum seekers who are in detention. Why are they in detention? Because the Home Office, who run prisons, also run the immigration service. And there's long delays, as you all know from you used to see them in the press. There are a lot of delays. Then there's chaos in the court system, which means, in effect, the Home Office, again, or it's the Ministry of Justice, have got 15,000 prisoners on remand. Not proven guilty, but on remand, awaiting a court case. Now that's expensive, folks. It costs £48,000 a year for each inmate, the same as Eton. Perhaps a preferable source of rehabilitation, says Simon Jenkins, but I don't know with some of the products that we've been hearing about lately whether that's true. Don't get the idea that I'm a socialist, I'm not. Well, only once a week. So, British penal policy is stuck in the philosophical dark ages, obsessed with retribution rather than rehabilitation. Our prisons are not havens of recovery. They are academies of crime, academies of crime. The prison's minister, Alex Chalk, seems to understand this, and he says, prisons should not ruin the redeemable or turn minor criminals into hardened crooks. And he wants to reduce the number of short-term sentences because 58% of short-term sentenced prisoners in Britain reoffend. In Norway, that same number is 20%. So, there's not much chance of reforming the prisons, partly because they're so overcrowded, partly because how can you run a prison? And here I have sympathy with the people who manage prisons. How can you run a prison if you've got 3 to a cell, that you're having to bang people up for 22 hours a day? A lot of people don't get any exercise. There's very little chance of doing any rehabilitative work of any depth. So I have sympathy. They're just overcrowded, overcrowded beyond any reasonable hope that we can do much to reform them. There's also another problem, is that the way our government is set up with opposing political parties, when was the last time they agreed on anything? Okay, when was the last time there was consensus in Parliament on any reform anywhere? And I can't think of one. I sat up last night till 10 to 12 trying to think of one, and I couldn't. Now, if we add to this that probation is still recovering from the botched privatisation attempt, the police are under terrible pressure trying to regain public confidence after a series of scandals, many of which were just totally reprehensible. For the first time ever, I very nearly refused to pay the police surcharge on my community charge. I thought about it for a long time. Was I willing to go to prison? No, it wouldn't reform me, and I do need reforming. Now, I'm told, and I found out over the course of a delightful lunch, that you are very well informed about restorative justice. And the wonderful Jo Berry popped in to say hello, and she is a star. She's an absolute star. And worth, have you all read the Guardian article about her on Saturday morning? Get hold of it, it's inspiring. It's only a snippet, but it's inspiring about what she did. And she's talking later this week?
On Thursday.
Wednesday
evening, thank you everybody.
Do turn up.
There are a few seats left, but they are disappearing.
Yeah, she's a star. So, you're very well informed, so I want to explore with you how we could use RJ better to improve the life for victims and offenders and reduce the demand on the criminal justice system, reducing the backlog of court cases, for example, and the numbers in prison. So may I ask, with a show of hands, how many of you are trained as RJ practitioners? 2? No, there must be more than 2. 3?
Over here.
4? Okay. How many RJ interventions, you worthy 3, have you undertaken?
What, in terms of the types of work that the 4 of us have done, or involvement?
Yes, a case. Have you had a case?
Yeah.
How many?
25, 26.
Oh, blimey. So, thank you for coming.
I'm always keen to learn.
You're not going to learn anything from me.
Well, we might. Yeah.
Any others?
About, I don't know, 10, 8 to 10?
Yeah, I've done workshops on the principles. I've not taken care.
Okay. Has it been a good experience for you?
Yeah.
Has it been a brilliant experience?
Personally, yes.
There we are, folks. Well, I'll go now. Hand over. Has good use been made of your training, skill and expertise and time?
Yeah.
You reckon?
Yeah.
You shrugged your shoulders then. Have you had enough work?
Yeah. There's 2 things going on here,
Yes.
which is there's the restorative justice facilitators, some of us are trained in, and then there's the Let's Talk group where we do, it's like community mediation, which is slightly different. So. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
My partner is trained as a mediator, but she hasn't had many...
Sorry, I couldn't hear.
My partner is trained as a mediator, but she hasn't had much work on that line.
Right, okay. I raised £3 million some years ago to train prison staff and probation staff in the use of RJ. And after 18 months the project was terminated because we just could not get the referrals from prisons and probation officers. We could not get referrals. So just register that. Restorative justice covers a multitude of different interventions. There's indirect, direct and shuttle mediation, there's conferencing, circles, there's panels, and more broadly truth and reconciliation commissions like the operation they undertook in South Africa. However, the bit I want to talk about is restorative justice between the offender and the victim. I'll mention other bits of restorative justice as well. Now, my definition of restorative justice is this, and please feel free to object to this. It's a process for resolving conflicts. It involves a meeting between the victim or victims and offenders to find out what happened. Because the court cases are not about what happened, it's about what happened in terms of the law. It's an interpretation of the law. The case is slanted, so it fits a category in the law. It's not necessarily what actually happened. We want to know who was harmed and to agree suitable reparation. That is, actions which could make the situation better for those harmed and reduce the risks of it happening again. So the principles. Face-to-face meeting between victims and supporters, all attend voluntarily. Trained facilitator convenes and leads a meeting, having met the attendees and explained the ground rules and likely outcomes. The restorative actions have to be suggested by the participants. They must be realistic and signed off as part of an agreement between all the parties. So, can I ask each table to elect a spokesperson and to make any comments to Amanda, who's absolutely loving this because she used to work with me. She was my PA years ago. It's going to chalk it up on the board. So, are those principles about right?
Can you read them out again?
I'm paid by the hour, not the word. Face-to-face meeting, all attend voluntarily. Trained facilitator convenes and runs the meeting. The reparative actions have to be suggested by the participants and agreed, and they must be doable. Do come in. So get someone to act as spokesperson. Amanda will chalk up your, we've got 3 minutes, we'll chalk up your things on the board.
For me, and that's the thing that my understanding offenders not to reoffend once they actually hear the impact, either via a shuttle, through a letter, or face-to-face. Face-to-face.
No, you just put it up on
That shuttle. Yes, no, he did. And other ways. Yeah. But to me, the word he hasn't yet mentioned is his impact.
And interesting, he uses harmer and offender rather than what's it? The victim.
Harmed and harm.
Rather than harmer and harm.
Yeah, because harmer and harm is about behaviour.
Yes, yeah. It was a very small attack. But yes, that
We haven't usually done it.
yeah, no.
Right.
Yeah.
You've had your 3 minutes, folks. This group. Anyone? I've lost control. It happens all the time.
We always work towards trying to
You're looking all very profound.
all sorts of reasons.
Well, I outlined the principles. Is that about right?
Yes.
Have I missed anything?
Oh, sorry, no, I wasn't
How long does it have? How long can restorative justice last? When is it something like that? When can it be viewed as complete?
Right, that is a question that has to go to the practitioners.
So first of all, I think I should say that I work in Wiltshire, not in Somerset. And my role in Wiltshire for Wiltshire Police is through Restorative Together, and we train facilitators at, depending on the level, but for me personally I've done quite a lot of cases, and some of them are what we would call sensitive and complex, so they're really just that. And I can think of a case that I'm doing at the moment, and that case has been running for 2.5 years, and it's ongoing. And I've done other more straightforward, apparently more straightforward cases, and they can last 6 months, 9 months, or 3 months. So it just depends on the case, always.
Thank you. Now you understand why I couldn't answer that question. Any other additions?
We're not looking for questions or comments.
Doesn't matter.
Anything from this table?
It was an emphatic yes. We just really got as far as the face-to-face aspect, and there's a comment that it could be very challenging for the victim, but it's then, I guess, that we thought that the facilitators' skills would come into play. Obviously, they are trained, and there would be perhaps pressure, depending on where people are located, for things to be done via Zoom or online. But we felt the energetic aspect of people being in the same space was important, and also so much, there are emotional aspects which can be read through body language, so the feeling aspects need to be felt and put across in the same space. That was about it.
Thanks. Anything from that group? This group?
Sorry. Only that the actions taken have to be agreed by the perpetrator and the victim, not the facilitator. Is that?
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Okay, that was just an interesting view. So it must be very tempting for a facilitator to jump in and offer his or her opinion, whereas in fact the ideas have to come from both parties.
This lady wants to reply.
Yes. We're very well trained in Wiltshire, and I would like to say that we never intervene in terms of offering solutions ever. That's not our role. Our role is to support the harmed and the harmer, which are the terms that we would use, to explore the impact that the event, whatever that event, has had on them, and to support them through quite a lot of meetings before we would consider bringing both parties together, to explore the impact, so that by the time we bring both parties together, for us as facilitators, and we always work in pairs, there are no surprises. So there might be surprises for either party, which we would have done a risk assessment on, but for us as facilitators, there should never be any surprises, and it therefore should be as safe as one can make it for both parties, because both parties are equally important. That sense of neutrality from our perspective is absolutely vital.
Right, now I'm going to expose you to a DVD, which I hope some of you haven't seen. I suspect quite a few have seen it. This is the story of Peter Wolfe and Will Riley. It's 10 minutes.
I couldn't really even begin to tell you how many crimes I've committed. I was once described as a walking crime wave. I was quite chuffed by that. I've always drunk. I used to love a drink, even as a kid. It was a way of life. I started taking drugs when I was 10. So all of a sudden I looked round and I was sticking needles in myself. I was an heroin addict. I'd stayed in a squat over East London, which I'll describe it to you. It was human waste all over the floor, syringes and empty beer cans everywhere, blood squirted up the wall from the syringes. My bed was an old mattress that we'd found in the dustbin, and my blankets were the clothes I slept in. I stunk to high heaven. That's how I lived. All this time I was taking other drugs, drinking copious amounts of alcohol, committing crime on a daily basis, sometimes on a multi-daily basis, 10 times a day crimes. It depended on how much you earned.
It's about 5 o'clock. I'm in my office, which is in the first floor, and it's time to go to the gym. I go upstairs, and as I walk up to the top landing, I push open the door, and there's a man that I'd never seen before.
He says, what are you doing? It's my house, what are you doing in here? And I give him some old flannel. I said, oh, I live over the road at number 2 and I see someone acting suspiciously and I heard a funny noise.
And I said, where's number 2?
I said, over there. But unfortunately, it was over there. And so he knew I was telling lies and he knew I was a burglar.
He unfortunately ran into a kitchenette that we have on the top floor and shouted knife. And so I thought, God, now we're in real trouble.
And I had this guy after me and I didn't get a knife. I got the top of the oven, heavy old thing, cast iron, and I put it, smashed him over the head behind me.
Which hurt, but again, I'm pumping, so I don't feel it very much.
He stumbled and we fought, and as we fought, we rolled down a flight of stairs, proper John Wayne stuff going on there, and there was a big old flower pot, and I picked it up and smashed him straight over the head with that. And I remember the blood coming out of his head.
And I kept going, and we bundled and fought and bundled and fought. And I got him outside the door, and I said, help me. And it just looked like 2 middle-aged men having a ding-dong. And then the police car came, so obviously someone had called the police.
The police pull up and I'm nicked in the back of the van.
They said to me, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm fine. So they said, well, you're bleeding. And as I put my hand behind my head, I've got my whole head is just saturated in blood.
I'm not about to sit there feeling remorseful and sorry. It was just a bad day at the office for me, so I'm off to prison and, oh well, can't wait to get to prison because get to prison, that means I can get some drugs.
My wife came to collect me in the hospital, and as I put the key in the door, I suddenly had a fear that there would be somebody at the other side of the door. And it happened day after day after day after day. And it's not a very nice feeling. You feel scared. So about 2 or 3 weeks later, a police officer called me, and he said that we're conducting a study on a thing called Restorative Justice, where the offender meets the victim, and would you be interested in taking part?
If I'm honest, part of me sort of wanted to say sorry to this fella, but the majority of me only wanted to do the Restorative Justice conference to get out of the cell for an hour. Suddenly this day came, and the prison officer opened my door. It was a lunchtime, and he said, come on then. I'm walking along this passageway. Whether or not it's true, I don't know, but apparently the screws used to say this was where the condemned man used to go. And at that very moment, I started to feel like a condemned man. I'm thinking, I don't really want to do this. I don't want to go and meet the victims of my crimes. I don't want to meet anyone. I just want to go and lay in my bed. And we get up to the door, and I'm thinking, I don't want to be here. I just don't want to be here. Just as I went to say it, the door opened.
And there is a guy I fought about 2 months earlier, and he's in a sort of prison garb and looking really sheepish. And, I'm beginning to think, what the hell are we doing here? But anyway, it's going to happen. Whatever it is, it's going to happen. So here we go.
So I started going on about the poor old me's and how I've had an hard life and giving all the social spiel, because all my life that's what I've done, give social spiel to probation officers and social workers. I thought I had everyone eating out the palm of my hands.
He's just going through the movements, just going through the same old lines, the same old trite. And I'm beginning to get very, very annoyed, very, very annoyed.
And it came to a point, and I said to
Will, when we first met. And that's it. And I just lose it completely.
And he started listing all the things that I've done. And he also started listing his feelings.
And it comes out like a fire hydrant. And I said to him, we didn't meet in some bloody cocktail bar in Islington. You broke into my house. You destroyed my one belief that I had, which is my ability to protect my family, my house, from people like you, and you did it in one fell swoop.
I never knew it made people feel sad, angry, bad, depressed, isolated, guilty about things I'd done. I didn't know.
Peter was just, it was like a train hitting him. You could see that he God, I've done this.
It was like a flow of emotion started coming out, and I never realised it. I just never realised the damage I'd done. I never realised the harms I'd caused. I never realised how many people it affected.
And he was a man who wasn't showing remorse because the lawyer had said, you've got to show remorse, you get time off. He was a man who was genuinely affected by what we had said. And we start conversing, we start talking, and Peter starts talking. He starts talking from his heart, from his real core of his existence.
When you hear the damage, what you have done, when you hear the harm you've caused, you've got to be a very, very bitter and twisted human being if this doesn't affect you. You've got to be a sicko. I was fully expecting these people who I'd done a lot of harm to say, lock him up, give him the birch, throw away the key, we don't care. But I was quite amazed. So I went back to that cell and sat there with all these feelings, you know, and I sat with them for a long time trying to work them out and separate them. And
you can't just leave him there. You've got to help him help himself. So therefore we then went out and said, listen, we want to see you change. We want to see you get yourself together. We want to help you in this process.
We'd like to see him address his alcohol and addiction problems. We'd like to see him address his offending problems. We'd like to see him maybe get some education, and we'd like to see him even get a job when he gets out.
In a court of law, the victim sits in the public gallery. He, she, his family, his loved ones are the most affected by this crime, and then the least involved in the process.
They don't get no input into it, and there's questions that need answering, and they can't possibly answer these questions unless they meet the harmer, the wrongdoer, the villain of the piece, the criminal.
And that's all this is bringing people around. Well, it happened to be a prison table, but I mean, it could be anywhere, and having them saying, well, why did you do that? You know, do you understand how that affected me? Do you understand how that affects other people? Ever since we first met, we continue to meet. We have become, both of us, utter converts to restorative justice, to restorative approaches, to bringing offenders and victims together.
Because of that conference, it initiated change, it implemented change. I implemented the change, but it sort of gave me the kickstart I needed. You know, I can't express gratitude enough for the Restorative Justice programme, and I've got to leave it there for a minute.
Questions, comments?
A question, I was very taken with the statement that Will Riley said that in a normal court of law, the victim sits in the public gallery and is the most affected but least involved. Is it not normal as part of a trial for a victim impact statement to be given, or is that... I don't know.
I don't know. I think so.
All I can say is one of the cases I'm doing at the moment, the reason it's taken so long, sorry, poor Alison.
Sorry.
It's all right.
So hold on just a sec, because
I'm so sorry, it's an old computer that won't do what I say.
The case that I'm involved in that's taken currently 2.5 years, one of the reasons it's taking so long is because the victim, or the harmed as we would call them, has not had the opportunity to read her victim impact statement to the court or to the harmer, and that's what we're trying to achieve
But it is,
on her behalf.
it is a normal part of the process.
It
of the
should
trial
be
to inform the sentencing.
a normal part of the process, but it doesn't always happen.
Is that a recent thing?
I'd
I've had
be on my
to
pay grade.
give one when I was reporting a crime. That I was saying earlier, it was Avon and the Somerset police. I was reporting a crime. They asked me if I was interested in restorative justice, and they also did take a victim impact statement. So that's just input from small experience that helps.
Okay.
Okay, but I'm interested to hear that you gave an impact statement
Yes.
as a result of saying you would wanted to take part in the restorative justice program, which seems unusual. Whereas
Yeah,
normal might
all
be-
victims are offered the
All
opportunity
victims
to
are.
write an impact statement.
Okay.
Victims have a right, I think. Okay.
Can I just ask one question?
Of course.
In that, it seemed that the first meeting they had was directly with each other rather than with a facilitator. Is that right?
No, there was a facilitator involved. His name was Mike Smith.
Okay. And he would have talked to both of them first?
Yes.
Okay.
And they would have to agree. And just to answer a point that was made earlier, it isn't. Have you finished? It isn't just victims who are nervous about saying yes to a restorative conference. In fact, I think offenders are probably more nervous. And I have known a probation officer intervene when we were trying to get a case going, saying it's much too emotionally disturbing for my client. To which the reply was, well, your client shouldn't have thought of that before he burgled that old lady's house. You know, it's a tough world. Tough world. Now, PPOs like Peter commit half of all crime where a conviction is obtained. That's what prolific offenders.
Sorry, can you explain PPO? PPO?
Yeah,
What does that stand for?
persistent and prolific offender. They really are. They're a crime wave on their own. Did you know that only 3% of all property and crime against a person recorded by the police results in a conviction? Think on that. I mean, it's just a minuscule slither of the total crime picture. Reoffending is said by researchers to cost £19 billion a year to the criminal justice system and £59 billion to societal and economic costs. Any other comments on the film?
I have a question. It's because the offender, what's it called? Harmer, he seems to have, well, he obviously had drug and alcohol. So the harmer had addiction problems.
Sure.
And when they started the process, had
He already, like, sorry, had he kind of gotten treatment for that already?
Peter, I got to know very well over a 10-year period, faded in and out of addiction. He took treatment. He married in the end the lady who was his alcohol treatment advisor. But he came in and he came out, came in and came out. But gradually the periods got longer and longer when he was not taking anything. In many ways, it's the most honest man I've ever met. He tells the truth about how he's feeling and where he wants to go. It doesn't happen very often. Now, not all cases are quite like that, because you don't always meet a Will Riley, who is a very intelligent, bright, forceful, successful man. But my goodness me, he warmed to Peter, and he rescued Peter from a life of crime, really. Now, to go to the other end of the spectrum, very much the end that this, I hadn't heard of this project before, but this project, which is absolutely brilliant. I want to take you to it's not an old people's protected estate, but it's an estate that's reserved for elderly folk, some of whom live on their own. Very quiet, they all look after their gardens, privet hedges are all trimmed neatly, and spring flowers everywhere. But it all changed when 2 families with 5 children moved into nearby houses. Well, the kids started misbehaving. They picked flowers from the gardens, threw cans over the hedge, rode bikes and trikes on the pavement, rang doorbells and ran away, and they were noisy. Well, what did the neighbours say? What did the neighbours say? Come on, tell me. What did the neighbours say?
Youngsters.
Sorry?
Damned youngsters. Damned youngsters. I'm imagining.
They weren't posh old people, they were people like me.
Little buggers.
What?
So little buggers.
Yeah, okay. They really were upset about it. Not safe to walk on the pavements, they said, with all those trikes and so much noise. So what happened is the neighbours started calling the police every time there was a little outburst of this misbehaviour. And every time the police sent a car up with 2 cops in. Every time. And the cops spoke to the harmed parties making the complaint, and then they spoke to the parents. One dad said, look, we've just come from Radstock, and his partner started sobbing, saying, I wish I could go back. Look, officer, they're picking on our kids. We're newcomers. And the other dad said, the people who live here are all oldies, they don't like kids. Kids will be kids. So it made no difference that the police were called every time. And in the end, the sergeant decided to adopt a restorative approach. He'd been on a course. And so he met the parents, invited them to come to a meeting, explained that what they wanted to do was find out what happened, who was harmed, what can we do to make it better, and how can we prevent it happening again. Meeting took place on a Saturday afternoon. Some neighbours were too frightened to attend. And those that didn't attend did volunteer to take part in the meeting, did volunteer to make tea and cakes. Gary was the facilitator. The rules were simple. He would invite people to speak. They could challenge by raising their hands. He would invite them to speak, but it was no shouting, no swearing, no interrupting. It started by asking the neighbours how they felt and so on. And after a while, the meeting became very heated. Now, don't believe this stuff. Don't believe this stuff that restorative justice meetings end in fights. There's not a single recorded incident of a fight in any of the literature, bar the one that happened on EastEnders, which doesn't really count. But meetings can get heated, and it's the skill of the facilitator to say, well, I think we'll have a break. And this is what the policeman did. He didn't blow his whistle to call for more reinforcements. He blew his whistle. Well, let's have a cup of tea and some of the cakes that people have made. Calmed it down. One dad gave out his phone number. He said, just call me. If the kids my kids are being a nuisance, I'll come and sort it. Then the other dad, somewhat reluctantly, followed suit. Anyway, Gary, the facilitator, wrote this all down, sent it to the neighbours after the meeting, as a sort of memorandum of intent, of understanding. This is what we agreed. So I have to ask you, did it work?
Yes.
Yeah. Who said yeah? You clearly judge my body language. It's a brilliant statistic. There was only one complaint, and that was about a drunk, not anyone to do with the families, but the drunk who was singing rather late on a Saturday night. Happily singing, I should say. So, can I ask you, at your tables, in your groups, if you could quickly tell me what other uses RJ could be used for in the criminal justice system? Quickly. You're all brilliant. Okay, one of the groups has stopped talking, so it's time we all got together. Can we be together, please?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Who's going to report this group?
Well, I think we sort of said that any situation, in theory, but obviously depending on the nature of the crime or what is it.
Right.
But I don't obviously like things like
That's okay.
relative power levels.
It's all right. It's okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, there is also, but we're thinking of the wider things. It's easy to jump to one-on-one crime. Someone thinking has done something directly to someone, but what about maybe when a person or a company has done something to a group of people or to the environment,
Yes.
more than just paying their way out of something? Sorry, I don't know how to summarise that.
Hand waving with right hand. How about this group?
I think anywhere where communication has broken down, really. Sorry, anywhere where communication has broken down,
Right.
and where people are not prepared to listen to the other side, to facilitate that ability to really hear the other side's story, it's very powerful because it gives you an understanding into their world that you may not have had.
Okay. Our group?
Nigel, you said
Sorry?
in your earlier talk, you said that the process within the court is set up to determine who is guilty and who is innocent. You know,
Right.
that there's a process that is gone through. What's wrong with bringing some sort of restorative justice element into that process, apart from the fact that it might cost an awful lot more money?
I'll come on to costs in a minute, but that's a brilliant question.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll declare the innings closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This group.
Quite a few questions really. Could it be used before things get to court stages, before prosecution?
Diversion, yes.
Yeah. Felt it could be used with other kinds of neighbour disputes, shoplifting, where there's an impact
Yes.
on
There's a very famous
staff.
project called the Milton Keynes Shoplifting Project.
And also questions about whether it is or can be used in cases of domestic abuse and sexual abuse, sexual crimes.
Both those are quite controversial, but the leading thinkers in restorative justice are perfectly happy for it to be used if participants agree. There's an element of choice in this. Sorry, I missed you.
So we discussed what it takes for a crime to actually reach the criminal justice system, first of all, but then we went on to the idea that really it could be applied to any crime where there's a victim. And so we also discussed how this might apply, for instance, to the new laws against protests.
Oh my goodness me.
And one of us thought that the protester might be a victim and the government minister might be a perpetrator. But
yes.
Yeah, but Annabelle also suggested that there are people who are harmed by some kinds of protest, like motorists whose journey is disrupted, that kind of thing.
Right, okay.
Can I just ask, you cited in the video, well, the video was a good example of how some criminals, for whom restorative justice has a rehabilitative influence. But are there is RJ broken down in terms of the powers of rehabilitation, in terms of types of crime? So, for example, are there any stats around, let's say, serial sex offenders, violent criminals, organised crime, or where does it really work?
Well, you saw a violent criminal there. Peter seriously injured, Will. Peter Wolf seriously injured Will. So that worked.
But what I'm talking about is, for example, other types of violent criminals. So, for example, organised criminal groups who basically spend all their time committing atrocious crimes against other human beings, and it becomes like an industry.
I think you would have to take every case on its merits. It just depends whether the facilitator thinks that there's a chance of that working. I'll give you the feedback. Yes, it could work in pre-sentence court reports, antisocial behaviour cases, police cautions. Brilliant project in Avon and Somerset there used to be, I don't know if it's still running. All cautions are done in a restorative way by 2 inspectors in Bristol. They have a terrific success rate in preventing breakdown of the antisocial behaviour order, caution rather. Juvenile courts, which we want to talk about, police complaints, parole reports, neighbourhood disputes, domestic violence and sexual violence, but we have to handle each case very carefully, because the last thing I want to do is to re-victimise the victim, which is a real danger in certain cases. So you heard Will talk about the London Crown Court trials. He mentioned an experiment that both Will and Peter mentioned they were invited to take part in an experiment. Well, this was an experiment conducted by the brilliant Professor Larry Sherman, and he organised it so there was a control group, just like a medical drug nice experiment, where you give one set of patients the drug and another simple set of patients you don't give them a drug, and you see you're able from that to deduce whether or not the drug works or how well it works. So he did that, and here are some of the results. Satisfied with the RJ process, 72% of the participants who took the RJ meeting said yes, 60% of the control group said they were satisfied with their process. Next question was, would you recommend this to family and friends in the London Crown Court trials? 78% said they would. Satisfied with the sentence? 45% in the London Crown Court trials. Post-traumatic stress? 49% fewer cases. 62% felt better, and 2% felt worse. Apology from offender valued, 72 said it helped. But that wasn't what people were after. We're not after an apology. They were after the perpetrator understanding what they'd done, as you'll see in the brilliant article by Joy Berry. Given that reoffending rates from custodial sentences are in the order of 70% after 2 years, these results are promising. Oh, sorry, but that must be used with care. Now, what Larry Sherman and colleagues they did what's called a meta-international study of 10 RJ projects, 8 from the UK, and the significance of this study is when they compare 10 projects, the chances of error are reduced, radically reduced to virtually nothing. So the results of that project, meta project, in terms of reoffending over 2 years were in the range of a 7% reduction and a 45% reduction. Now that's worth having, that 45%, even a 40%, even a 30% reduction is well worth having. Cost effectiveness. The big problem is getting people referred for RJ. I was involved in a very well-resourced project up north. It attracted 300 referrals, but only 20 RJ interventions took place. The conversion rate from referral to a direct RJ intervention is about 5%. Each RJ intervention costs £3,500. Each referral costs £300. The full benefits of RJ are in the order of £14 for every £1 invested to the economy and victims, £4 for every £1 invested in the criminal justice system. But when a sensitivity analysis is applied, and that means using the most pessimistic likely outcomes instead of the most optimistic, that reduces, it becomes 1 for 1 for the criminal justice system. So we're still on the right side of the balance sheet, more or less. So this raises a question of should we consider selecting cases that would bring the most benefits to victims, offenders, the courts and wider society. I don't know how you would do that. I just don't know how that would be set up. Now, the exception to this, how can I put it? I told you about the mega project I was involved in. I was involved in 4 other projects, quite big projects. I raised the money, that was my job, raising the dosh. But it was very difficult to go back to funders and they say, well, how many RGA conferences did you actually run? And you say, well, you put in £1 million, sir, and we did 4. It doesn't work if you don't get the funding anymore. The exception to this is youth offending teams. Youth offending teams have a statutory duty to offer RJ to all young offenders. Whether they do or not, we don't really know. Will Riley's YME organisation, under a Freedom of Information request to the MOJ, asked to see the annual returns of how the police and crime commissioners spend the MOJ grant for restorative justice. And I have to tell you, the results were very disappointing. 10 PCCs did not submit any returns at all, and most of the others were incomplete. So I have to question whether we want PCCs. Do we need PCCs? Do we need 2 chief constables? Because in my area, your area, Avon and Somerset, you've got an ex-cop as the PCC. You have in Gloucestershire. Wiltshire, I can't remember. Yeah, so you've got effectively two chief constables. The PCC, who's often never got past the rank of chief superintendent, having to boss around the chief superintendent, the chief constable, and possibly turn him down for the job. It's a crazy system. It's absolutely crazy. It's not democratic. 25% turnout for PCC elections. Very poor, very poor. So we need to think about that. No, I'm not aware of any research that's been undertaken about how offenders and victims are invited to take part in the RJ meeting. In the case in the film, it was a police officer who was an RJ facilitator who asked them if they'd attend. So What could we do to improve the rate of conversion from referral to RJ intervention? What could we do to improve the rate of referrals? Any ideas?
No, but I'm wondering why there is the gap, if there are so many referrals going on and that's not followed through. Do you know why?
No.
Do you know why that's the case, from referral to follow through?
No.
You don't know. It's just a shame, you know, like, where's the will?
Can I ask, what's the understanding and appetite of politicians for, if you like, embedding RJ within the justice system?
Can we talk about that in a minute?
Sure. The reason why I ask that is because when you say any ideas about increasing the referral rate increasing it from referral and implementation, it can be done if politicians give police forces targets. But if they themselves they're ambivalent about RJ, they're not going to get, the police officers are not going to get targets.
Right. Well, I'll go on for a little bit and then I'm going to come back to that because you've asked the question of the day. Sorry?
I've kind of got a similar question, but because you said when it's youth cases, then you have to offer the restorative justice, and in that case, the percentages are much higher. So it does seem that if it's the law, or like if this is like embedded, then it does happen.
With youth offending teams? Yes. It does happen.
I think my question is also about the systemic. It seems like every case is taken as an individual case without really taking into account the world we live in. So the example of the protester, okay, somebody was held up to get to their job interview, now they lost their job interview because the motorway was closed. But do you take the protester into this system, or do you bring in the energy companies that are burning the fossil fuels, that are forcing the protest? So I think, can we look at it on an individual case without considering that we live in a capitalist system where I feel like a lot of, we don't have all of the things we need, and that will impact people's behavior.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. It's a very interesting question. That's something we ought to test out for real.
Nigel?
I said we have to abolish capitalism first.
Yes, well that's beyond, even Freud will find that difficult.
My comment was just to say, I suppose thinking about it on an emotional level, so when you see restorative justice in action, you're getting those two parties, or maybe one more than the other, to see their impact and actually realise it. And then obviously the people that are making these laws, because they don't have that experience necessarily, they're almost in the same position that they don't see the impact of their action or inaction, so they just don't care enough, they're too far removed from it. But I guess that's not exactly an insight, it's just how it is.
Nigel, you did mention a very brutal statistic, which was that, is it only 3% of crime against a person or property actually ends up in the criminal system?
Yes.
So the 97% of people who have these things inflicted upon them don't get anywhere near any sort of restorative justice process.
Yes.
Is there any sort of case for bringing the law enforcement community into the restorative justice process as perpetrators?
Pass. I want to get, yes. We spend a fortune on the police, we spend a fortune on prisons, we should spend a fortune on the judiciary. They would say it's ridiculous that we spend all that money. We go on spending that money when it doesn't give us a very satisfactory service. So canvass your MPs, not the one in the next constituency.
Can I ask a really basic question?
Aye.
Do the restorative justice facilitators, are they volunteers or do they get paid?
I think it varies. A lot get paid, the trainers and the facilitators.
Right.
And when I was in practice, I was a great advocate of trying to get volunteers to come forward and be restorative justice facilitators, because it's not rocket science. It requires a certain sensitivity, it requires people who follow the rules and follow the principles and who are fair-minded and can keep their mouths shut at times, right?
Yeah, can I just say in Wiltshire, all the facilitators are volunteers. I'm a volunteer.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, we've only got not very long left, but I just want to tell you 2-3 more things. I worked for 20 years, I was an assistant consultant to a major successful security company that ran not just armed guard, not just guards in uniforms, but also ran a custody unit, escorting prisoners, a fine collection service and so on. A whole range of near criminal justice things. And one of the chief, most senior managers there said to me, Nigel, one day, he said, Nigel, don't let perfection be the enemy of the good, quoting Voltaire, Candide. Don't let perfection be the enemy of good. If you get it 80% right, you'll probably be wasting your time and your resources if you try and get that up to 100%. So that's a good lesson. Don't let perfection be the enemy of what is good. The second lesson was find better ways of delivering your services without compromising your principle. Continuous improvement. So they had a fines collection service in Merseyside where the fine collection rate was awful. So what they did was they allowed people to pay by plastic. Before, people had to turn up with pound notes and shillings and pence. But it was a fantastic advance because the improvement was by 60% in the first year. 60% improvement in the service. So the motto is make it as easy as possible for people to do their jobs. Reduce costs where you can. And don't compromise your principles. So now we come to the last bit. The All-Party Parliamentary Committee on Restorative Justice did a review of restorative justice in the youth offending teams. And it was a very complimentary review in many regards. The passion that the people who did the review found amongst the youth offending team people who attended was heartwarming, they said. The scope, in the depth and scope of what they felt, impressive. Each yacht has or should have a discrete youth offending restorative justice team. Yachts are made up, they're a virtual team, they're made up of secondments from probation, police, social services, other local authority services. It's a composite team. So they're very good at marshalling resources for young people who are in trouble. They've got social services there, they've got psychiatric services, if they can find them. It appears, according to this review, to work. They seem to be able to manage kids right back to school, right back to their parents, right back to children's homes and so on and so forth. Very, very impressive. But there was a problem, and the problem was that the police are responsible for getting the victim's consent to take part in a restorative justice conference. The police. Now, I can just hear it. You don't want anything to do with this blooming old restorative justice stuff, do you, mate? No, that's for sissies. You can just hear it. I don't mean to be offensive, but I mean, I've heard it. So we have to find a way round that. And one suggestion that's on the table is that there's a universal, mandatory agreement. Why do the police have to have to get the victim's approval? Because they regard the details they have of the offence and the details they have about victims as belonging to them. It's their information. Always remember, the people who've got the information hold the power. They can decide whether something goes or doesn't go. So we have to find a way around that. Now, this review was very, very good in many ways, but its weakness was not supported by any statistics to show the volume and outcomes of RJ work undertaken. Now, the key to successful implementation of projects is to have a comprehensive management system in place that demonstrates on a regular basis, monthly, how different parts of your team's actions are functioning. Many staff, particularly those who worked in the organisation which I was chief executive, were very cautious about management information. They wanted better pay, they wanted better cars to drive around in, they wanted better this and better offices. And I had to say to them, you've got to demonstrate your worth. And they said, well, where's the voluntary sector? Well, if you're asking for public money, if you're asking for charities to give you money, you've got to demonstrate your worth. And that means management information. I know you'll hate this, but even in socialist regime, you can't just let people do what they want to do. You have to keep people to task. They have to deliver. And I only asked my consultants working in a consultancy team, I want to know how much you've earned this month. I want to know what's in your order book. I want to know how many calls you've made to prospective clients. I want to know everything, because it's a business that you're in. And I know you won't like that, but I'm sorry, but it's not capitalistic, it's good socialism. Believe me. So I've got an idea for you. If the yachts are making such a success of RJ, given the pressure the courts and prison service are under, and probation, I wonder if the approach that we've adopted for young offenders could be replicated for adult offenders. Remember, youth offending teams persuading the juvenile courts to send fewer people to custody than ever before. They're avoiding prosecutions for 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds and 12-year-olds. This is a triumph. It's a quiet, modest triumph. Can't we do that for adults, huh? Have, like youth offending teams, virtual teams comprising secondees from probation, prison, police, court, victims, mental health services, and voluntary sector rehab services. They have to have protocols for information sharing, consent from victims and offenders, KPIs on conversion of referrals to RJ cases, which I would insist on being 30% at the low end. know, and this would be overseen by local managers and the Ministry of Justice. And I would like to see the idea trialled in 20 locations and monitored closely to debug the system, create the guidance, standards, the KPI, and closely follow the costs. And I'm sorry I talk about costs, but we have to. We just have to. Even to have an incoming government that's got any room to make any reforms, it's got to be on the basis of good economics. So I want to stop there because I'm tired, I'm old, and I have a lovely lunch, and Amanda's got a lot of stuff up there for me to ponder on. Well, what have you been doing, Mandy?
Talk too fast.
So, thank you very much. If you want to comment, what about this idea? What about this idea? You've got 5 minutes. This idea of setting up an adult offending team in every area to do pre-sentence courts, to do diversion schemes, to do everything possible to reduce the prison population, to reduce the harm to victims, to reduce costs, and to make us feel less ashamed of the fact we've got the worst highest prison population in Western Europe. It's disgusting. Thank you, Froome. Thank you, Froome. Very lovely afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody want to make a response to that final change question?
Yeah, I do.
My thought is that I think the numbers in prison is partly political, it's a political decision. They want to show that people are being, sort of punished for crime. They're not, the politicians and people, presumably people who vote for them, like the idea of people being punished, and they view being in prison as the appropriate punishment. And it's not in their mind to get appropriate justice. It's actually a political decision. It's not a retributive.
Okay.
It's not a
Okay. Well, I'm not aware of any political party advocating any reform at the moment. And I will tell you one thing about the prison numbers. They're inflated by 15,000 prisoners on remand. Those people who are not yet guilty. And that's because of the delays in the court. And they're inflated by another 20,000 odd of asylum seekers. And that is a bureaucratic cop-out. So that's the only way you can describe it. So let's get those numbers down. And if you can't do it in Froome, you can't do it anywhere.
Yeah, just a quick question. What's the level of usage of RJ within the other countries in Western Europe?
Well, France say they're doing a lot of restorative justice, but it's mediation. And it's mainly a mediator running between injured parties, suggesting a compromise situation. And that's fine, but it doesn't have the same oomph as face-to-face restorative justice. Canada's quite good. I don't know about the incidents at the moment. Quebec is French, and they follow the line of their mother country, as far as I understand it. When I went there and I showed them this clip, they didn't want to know. They really didn't want to know, because they said, well, it was the police who were involved. How can the police be impartial to an offender? Well, my experience is, having sort of making slightly snidey comments about the police, I've come across some absolutely brilliant facilitators in the police, absolutely brilliant, who've gone the extra mile to make it happen. And I've also come across come across a lot of flaws. I didn't say that. That was you. We're not allowed to be ventriloquists.
Does anybody else want to make comments before we close? Just want to thank you so much, Nigel, for a really, really stimulating afternoon. I think the attention everybody in the room sort of shows not just the material, but your knowledge of it, your experience. And I'm sorry that we put you through months of work to put this together. But from our side, it's been a really great experience. And to have the Let's Talk group here, who are talking and thinking about these things a lot, I hope there could be some follow-on. And over in this corner, raising these really big issues about the system within which we live and how on earth restorative justice could work in that wider situation has really got me thinking. But I'm imagining everybody here is going away with some really provocative thoughts. Now, this is a little bit like the Oscars. We're offering everybody a goodie bag to take home.
Thank you very much.
Just a few gifts from Froome and from the Kindness Festival. And we will thank you very, very much again for coming over. And Amanda, thank you very much for organising it.
Wow.